Hello, everybody! Welcome to another episode, the first episode of the New Scratch. We take topics and we look at articles and we pinpoint little parts of the articles that are useful, put them all together and define and describe stuff for you so you don't have to. And today we're going to be looking at women's rights in 2021. What are some of the things related to women's rights that have happened this year, and how are we looking on women's rights in general? Let's get started. First, we're going to start with our valuable friend, Wikipedia. A 2019 report from the World Bank found that women have full legal rights to men in only 6 countries in the world: Belgium, Denmark, France, Latvia, Luxembourg, and Sweden. Violence against women is, collectively, violent acts that are primarily or exclusively committed against women. Violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women, and violence against women is one of the more crucial social mechanisms by which women are forced into subordinate positions compared with men. Now, when you think about this, you may think that violence against women is just something that's, in the third world, it's in those underdeveloped areas, but it's not that simple. Domestic violence is a big problem, and domestic violence is still a big problem in countries like the United States. In the United States, you are more likely to be killed by your spouse than a stranger. That is a reality, and it's also true in most countries in the world. And in general, it's important to understand that these kind of issues are things that affect every part of our day-to-day lives in some way, and we have to keep an eye out for them and have conversations with each other and talk about this stuff. You can't prevent it from happening, but by turning a blind eye, you'll put yourself into a situation where you might actually make this worse for somebody. So don't think that because violence against women is what I'm talking about right now, that you living in a country that is like the United States or, whatever, that you don't have to deal with that, because it's actually still a big problem. Domestic violence is a big problem. Women are at more risk of being killed by their husband than the husband is at risk of being killed by the woman. The Declaration of Elimination of Violence Against Women was adopted by the United Nations in 1993. The resolution established that women have a right to be free from violence. I'm laughing because this was established in 1993. That was so recently. Most of the time you look at these resolutions and it's like, oh yeah, slavery, abolishment started in the late 1800s, some places earlier, most places later. The right to vote, okay, women right to vote, 1900s, early, mid, sort of, kind of. Right to be free from violence, nah, you don't get that shit till 1993. What? That's insane. Now let's look at some recent news stories. So this post is by the Wall Street Journal, and it states, Washington. The Biden administration is resuming the practice of evaluating women's reproductive rights in various countries as part of the State Department's annual survey of global human rights, reversing a decision by the Trump administration. These moves included revoking the expansion of the Mexico City policy, or the global gag rule, which prevented federal funds from going to foreign aid groups that perform abortions. That's so funny. Think about it. We're all right giving money to people who actually kill other people. They do. Not even under the table, they're fighting wars and we fund them, they kill other people. Yet we didn't. We were like, oh wait, nah. If you're an abortion, you're a murderer. We don't work with the murderers. No. We don't do that. But we do. It's ridiculous. These double standards. New York Post adds, the Equality Act is currently in Congress, by the way. It passed through the House, but needs to pass through the Senate and might not feel like it might not pass, but who knows. I personally want it to pass, but whatever. The Equality Act, which candidate Biden vowed to make a priority and which is set to be voted on by the House this week, the act would also massively expand the government's regulatory reach. The Equality Act explicitly exempts itself from the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act, and the act treats any refusal to offer abortion as pregnancy discrimination. Now, this is all stuff I got off of the New York Post, and I'll tell you, the New York Post is not happy about this at all. I had to go through like 8 paragraphs of attacking and saying that the United States is burning, it's ruined, this attack on our basic society, it's going to take away the stability of everything we know, everything we understand for, everything we believe in will be destroyed. These were the 4 sentences in those 8 paragraphs that I felt like were worth reading just for reference. And it's so frustrating. Moving on. Vice adds, last year, the states introduced dozens of bills that would have restricted trans people's abilities to change their IDs to match their gender, blocked trans kids from getting health care, or stopped them from participating in sports. But when coronavirus hit and the country ground to a halt amid the coronavirus pandemic, just one state, Idaho, managed to pass anti-trans legislation. However, it's only the second week of 2021, and legislators across 13 states have already introduced 19 bills aimed at stripping away the rights of transgender people. This onslaught suggests that the United States is on track to see a huge amount of anti-trans legislation, according to a tally by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, provided to Vice News. There were 52 bills that explicitly attacked trans rights in 2020, a new record, the ACLU found. Research indicates that letting trans and non-binary kids take puberty blockers, drugs that delay puberty, and gender-affirming hormone therapy can improve their mental health, and, most critically, it can keep them alive. In a 2018 study published by the American Academy of Pediatrics, more than half of trans male teenagers said that they had attempted suicide. And nearly 30% of trans female teens said the same. And more than 40% of non-binary young people in general said that they had tried to kill themselves. Now, you're used to hearing the metric, they'd thought about killing themselves. You know, like 40-50% of people admit to thinking about killing themselves. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about people who did try. And this is a demographic of people that has almost a 50% rate of have tried to kill themselves, which is absurdly high. That doesn't happen. Even in like prisoners and slaves, that doesn't happen. So that is a big, it's an outlier. It's a big issue in that sense. However, I will add that there's a lot of atrocities happening to rights, and I'm not sure how many trans people there actually are, and I do want trans people to do well. But at the same time, in some cases, it's almost certain that focusing on a small minority, a small subgroup of the population, such as the trans population, will distract us from some large degrees of suffering from others. So it's a balance, right? The problem is that in politics, we tend to be told that something is for one thing, but then in reality, it ends up causing something else. And you're better off assuming that everything you hear, there's the stated reason and then the intrinsic reason, or the deeper reason, or the truth, I guess, if you want to call it that. And you should always anticipate that the truth is different than what the stated reason is. Sometimes it's the same. But more often than not, there's people who benefit in some way. And yeah, it's complicated. It's very complicated. So we have to be careful. We have to consider both sides. You can't just be like, oh, you have to always be pro-trans. But you also can't just ignore these people, especially if there's just basic laws that you can change that decrease suicide rates. Like, that's easy. That's an easy fix. That's not as complicated as, like, making all of U.S. society less sexist. That's fucking hard. Like, really complex. You know, just making some basic changes to laws that allow trans people to be treated properly is, that's the basic path to having your rights. You know, you go through suffrage and getting those rights. Usually you don't get rights unless you fight for them. And by you, I mean whatever you're identifying with. If your subset of identification hasn't fought for their rights, like if you're identifying as a gay person now in San Francisco, you're great, you're fine. But if you're identifying as a gay person in the 1600s in medieval Europe, someone might kill you. So it's highly complicated. Really, really complicated. And even today, there's places where if you are gay, you don't get treated properly. You get abused. Vice adds, several of the anti-trans healthcare bills proposed this year a striking exception. Healthcare providers can still perform surgeries on infants with ambiguous genitalia, or in cases where a minor does not have the normal sex chromosome structure for a male or female, in the words of one Mississippi bill. This would allow physicians to perform cosmetic surgeries on intersex infants, a practice activists are trying to stop. So what this essentially means is that the anti-trans people are having a double standard. And that's why it points out a controversy. Because the reality is, you can't say, their argument for, like, most anti-trans argument about surgery, like if you are a male and you want to become a female, the argument is that you don't know any better because you're still young, you're a minor in almost all these cases, you're not able to make a sound decision that's going to affect you for the rest of your life, you're not legally able to do so, and that's their train of thought. You can't consent to yourself, basically, because you're too young, you're too ignorant. And these bills talk about a scenario where there's a baby born, but there's something wrong, so to speak, with their genitalia. So they don't look obviously like a girl or obviously like a guy, or they have some cosmetic thing. The bill makes an exception for that situation. And the anti-trans people say that in that situation, it's good because you want to make sure that the individual with the messed up sex organ gets their sex organ changed cosmetically to look right so that they don't go through trauma later on in their life. And the problem here is that that's a double standard, right? Because you can't say that people who are 14 can't make a decision about their life while also saying that a baby that is a week old, you can mess with them. And it's complicated. Like, we're talking about cosmetic differences, not things that will actually cause functioning problems or health issues. We're talking about purely cosmetic surgery. So, again, this is a double standard, and double standards frustrate people. For Strangio, the exceptions for surgery on infants is proof that these bills, which purport to protect young people from being pressured into healthcare they're apparently too young to understand, are really about enforcing gender norms. It's not about autonomy for young people, Strangio said. It's not about consent, because they specifically exempt from the bills any surgical interventions on infants, when it's to normalize people's bodies, consistent with prevailing norms of binary sex. That's hard to wrap your head around, but what he's saying is that they say it's okay to make a body that's neutral into a male or female, essentially, but it's not okay to make a body that's like suicidally male into a female. Long story short. Moving on, now let's look at people's comments. So this thread was about people's thoughts on feminism, and I went through and I picked some of the ones that were, particularly productive and constructive. So let's get to it. I'm a female, and I do identify as a feminist. For the most part, feminists are good people with good ideas. However, people who label themselves hardcore feminists tend to be incredibly obnoxious. Quotes like, "All men deserve to die," "Women are the better sex," and "We should have this woman as a CEO, even though she's highly unqualified," make my eyes roll. I think it's wrong to have extreme views of anything. Extreme feminists, extreme Trump supporters, extreme watermelon appreciators, etc. Prairiel adds, "I am really grateful for it. I was raised in an extremely conservative religious household, and feminism opened my eyes to a lot of shit I experienced when I was growing up. I'm happy that I can spot and avoid that nonsense now, instead of tolerating it, because it's just how things are. Women are made to be martyrs. A woman's place is this," etc. I think people who demonize feminism don't realize that there are large communities, like the extremely conservative and religious, that are still out there oppressing women. I'm a Hispanic woman living in a predominantly Hispanic metro area, and I've still encountered fairly outdated culture pressures. For example, a big thing here is that for many young Hispanic girls like myself, we are pressured to stay at home with our family, and many times the only option to leave is to get a boyfriend or get married. I'm glad that feminism helped you spot the things you grew up with. It just shows how necessary it is. Candy Days adds, "I love it. It's given me a voice and taught me to stand up for myself. Feminism has helped me overcome stupid misconceptions about how the world works, and taught me I am more important than how much men want to sleep with me. It's given me a network of amazing women around the world. It's pointed me in the direction of better television, films, and books. It's given me a healthier view of both men and other women. It helped me realize that, actually, the world isn't as single shifty as a place as I thought it was. Now, sexual harassment is something I can talk about, rather than suffering in silence because I believed it was a price I had to pay for being a woman in the world. In short, it's made me a better person." Apple Kicks adds, "Feminist and found it interesting to learn about how the patriarchy can impact men. The whole idea that men cannot be emotional or care for kids is outdated. It's interesting how past movements like women getting jobs kind of help men as they always had the pressure to provide. There's been a few guys I know who've been interested in discussing it. Online it's harder as many see only feminism as a problem for men. Sometimes we have the same fight, but we fight it on different angles. Maybe together we can bring down these gender stereotypes." I was actively discouraged as a young girl to follow my dream of being a scientist. I had mentors tell me that girls did not have what it takes, that they are not worth their time because in the end they chose to have a family over a career. Even now, I sometimes had my advice dismissed by this intern in the lab, but if my male colleague agreed with me, the intern would comply. Sexism is still very real in some parts of science and a lot of the world. Wepu adds, "Well, considering that states are falling all over themselves to limit abortion and contraception access, I think it's not yet time to say that men or women are 100% equal. Never mind the broader societal inequality in housework, plenty of good statistics on this subject, dress codes that only apply to schoolgirls but never schoolboys, and so on and so forth. There's more work to be done. The caricatures y'all are slinging around in this group existed during the fight for female suffrage, too, by the way. The stereotypical humorless suffragette who wants to be a man and who wants to emasculate every man she encounters, yeah. Check out some editorial cartoons from the 1910s sometime. Feminism, no matter what wave and how serious the issue, has always been mocked and derided. Women aren't supposed to bother their pretty little heads with fighting for their rights. The attacks on Tumblerinas and feminazis are nothing new. Women need to stop telling other women what they want out of life is wrong. Feminism is partially about the freedom of choices that they had previously been denied to women. But that doesn't mean the new choices or options are always better. Women are free to choose to be wives, bachelors, CEOs, artists, mothers, trophies, athletes, conservative, liberal, Christian, atheist, and so on and so on. Judging other women for their choices by saying she owes something better to her gender pulls us all down. Also, if you're going to go on and on about male privilege, you need to acknowledge female privilege. You can't lambaste males for what is perceived as gender-coded privilege, while ignoring your own gender has a different but distinct set of advantages. Yeah, to me, equality isn't about becoming superior or ignoring our differences to make us like men. It's about saying, yes, women are different and we have unique issues, but socially and legally we deserve the same equal rights, so that our differences are no longer used as a block or as an excuse to say we're weak and inferior. We are strong in our own way. We can be weak in others, but we can also deserve respect. Lunch and Bento adds, I don't really care as long as you don't tell me how to be a real woman. People who first meet me would think I'm just a stay-at-home mom, which is like the epitome of anti-feminism at this point. What they don't know is that I'm actually a real estate investor who works from home because my income is generated from rentals. And if I want to have traditional gender roles because I genuinely enjoy being feminine or doing feminine things, then let me have them without saying I'm betraying womanhood. If my child, regardless of gender, wants to be feminine and do feminine things, then let them. If they want to do masculine things, let them. If you say I shouldn't get my daughter girly toys because it forces them to be feminine, regardless of the fact that she actually wants them, then you're forcing her to choose a masculine role based on her gender. Likewise, if you refuse to get your son something you view as masculine that he wants, you're choosing for him based on his gender. And that's a hypocrisy I wouldn't be able to stand. Goofy Movie adds, the sad part is that you even need to justify you being a stay-at-home mom. Why do you need to be a real estate investor to justify that you are a mother? A woman shouldn't have to be like a man to gain respect. She should be respected for what she does and what only she can do. That is the feminism that we should be fighting for. If she would like to explore her business side as well, that doesn't make her any more or any less. I was the same as you. I used to think of feminism as extreme and unneeded. I thought it wasn't the subject to sexism. I thought I wasn't subject to sexism. Then I grew up. I got out of my small town, went to college, etc. I'm now pushing 40 and I see that sexism is rooted so deep. I was being subjected to it and I didn't realize. Now I like to read about concepts such as microaggressions, etc., to understand the subtle ways in which sexism is still a very part of my life. I still think that sometimes things go too far. I had a beloved male dorm dad in college tell me that someone in his women's studies class stated that all men are rapists, some just haven't done it yet. No, just no. But as I go through this world, I see that the subtle sexism I'm subjected to in my life is much more common than that kind of extremism. I think people are wrong to see a dichotomy between ordinary feminists who just want equality and are unbiased versus crazy militant feminists who hate men. When it comes to sexism against women, there's a big third category of people who don't hate women. who don't go around saying women suck, but who harbor anti-woman sentiment on some level, and might go towards the women suck extreme in certain situations, like they just broke up, or they've had a few drinks, or something. I think that same exists on the other side. I've met feminists who don't go around saying men suck, but talk to them long enough and anti-male ideas emerge. They're not the equivalent of Klansmen or something, but they exist and have they have problematic views. I'm pretty sure that's how most people are. Like, most people don't communicate very well and they don't express themselves effectively. So they're likely to think something a lot but not really do much about it. Not saying all people are like that, but, most people are. The bar's pretty low, to be honest, compared to the whole global population. As a population, like our humanity, we like to complain a lot more, and we essentially crave human connection more than anything else. It goes food, shelter, water, human connection. So as long as you have food, shelter, and water, your soul, your entity, is always going to look for human connection. But in doing that, you might connect with the wrong kinds of people and hurt yourself and get really hurt by it. So it's complicated, as always, right? Moving on. Usernames, good for username ads. Feminism is very good as a whole. Much of the concepts are very useful and help everyone, not just women. I just think that some people, namely teens who are not yet familiar with moral gray areas, just get a tad bit militant about it. As in, someone does something wrong and they're never forgiven for it, no matter how long ago it happened or how much they've apologized. And I think that's ridiculous. People can improve, and often do. And it doesn't make sense that what they did once was okay, but it shows that they're going to try not to do it again. People aren't perfect. They make mistakes. But otherwise, I think feminism is unfairly made fun of for reasons that I don't find all too solid. People really have it on the head, though. It's not that the people who make fun of feminism and attack it, they're attacking the extreme feminists and stuff, and that's a dichotomy. No, dichotomy is a bad word to use. I need to use simpler words. Our society just does that. It's not something unique to feminism. We tend to like to simplify and judge the views that we don't understand instead of taking the time to try and understand them. And our fighting essentially boils down to that as a trait. If that changes, then as a result, our society will change. But we're much more keen on blaming our politicians, despite the fact that people have been blaming their politicians for hundreds of years. But we are what the politicians are created out of. So that has implications, right? All right, everybody. That's it for now. Thanks for watching our first video. If you want us to do a video about any subject, this channel is focused on explaining things, okay? So if there's some news event that you don't understand because it's about like the relationship between two people and the history they had before and something's really relevant but you don't understand why it's important, that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to explain. And we're trying to compile a bunch of different resources and then look at comments to make videos that educate us about these kind of trends in an informative way. And I need to kind of work on getting my bias out of it, because you can tell I'm pretty biased about certain things, and there's certain subjects I just need to know to not talk about, and I'll get there eventually. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao.